Good morning, everybody. As you know, I'm Andrew from Terraco Data Environments in South Africa.
My name is Alex. I'm the COO and the co-founder of iColo, with our first carrier-neutral co-location data center in Mombasa, another one ongoing.
All right. Yeah, so we have up here Terraco, which is the South Africa, well-known carrier-neutral South Africa data center, and obviously iColo, which is the new one that's come up in Kenya, just launched in Mombasa. Seeing as our friends from Raxio aren't here, and for anybody else, I think as a first question, who's thinking of getting into the business, what advice do you have for them based on your experience running data centers? I think Andrew for a few years now, and I think Alex for a couple of months now. What's your advice to the boys in Uganda, and your advice to anybody else that's thinking of doing this thing in Africa, particularly?
Well, first advice is just do something else. Yeah, look, as I said, there's a lot of things that needed to be in place before Terraco could do what Terraco does, and you know that's okay. There are just a lot of things that needed to fall in place. So it's not just a case of building something. There needs to be you know, a friendly regulatory environment, and you need to have, you know, an open market, and you know, in terms of the ISPs and the carriers. That's it's a lot of work around that, you know, getting the market ready for that, and you know, it is hard work doing that. So if you are looking to do something vendor neutral, you're going to have to prepare yourself to be involved in a lot of conversations that you didn't expect to happen.
A few things I would add. Take a close look at the location, and there are many factors to consider for location. I won't go into them in detail here, but that location ties in also with the markets that you have. They need to get to your facility both physically as well as from a network's point of view. I think being open is very important, and creating that community around all the various different types of customers that you might have available. Have an open mind about that. And the last point then is also to pay attention to the standards. I mean, standards are there to make your life a lot easier. And don't try and reinvent the wheel, generally, is what I would say.
So it's not easy, is essentially what you're saying. I think, I mean, as a follow-up, particularly for you, Alex, any specific challenges you experienced in Kenya, you know, being pretty much, you know, the first, you know, carrier neutral facility in Kenya? Any specific challenges that that perhaps maybe Andrew might or might not have faced that you saw in Kenya?
For us, I think as a new company, the first time when you get out and stand up there and say you're going to do this thing and build this thing, it takes quite a lot of time for people to believe you, to know that you're actually going to do it, that you're going to succeed at building it, and to do it to some kind of a standard that's usable. From a physical point of view, try not to fight things that exist in your country. So pick building and construction methods that people are familiar with. Although you do have to push the boundaries generally in these markets here, for example, on subjects around fire stopping and fireproofing, and getting a building certified to that sort of standard takes effort. But there are other parts that you can do that you should use the techniques and methods that's within your local market to make your life easier.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I mean, we had the same thing, getting people to buy into the concept was difficult. And as I mentioned, you're going to spend a lot of time here convincing people and explaining what you're doing. But also just want to agree that you have to know your market, right? It's not, this is not something that you can just pick up out of one area and put down somewhere else. But, you know, it also doesn't mean that you can't follow what others have done or, you know, speak to other people. We spent a lot of time initially in the European markets, looking at all the trends and getting ideas on what would work.
Okay, thank you. There seems to be an issue with the projector cable. Sorry about that. But I still have the questions here nonetheless. And seeing as I made it interesting by not sharing them with you, that will put you on the spot to be more honest. My next question really is about around the significance of the term, it's fine, the significance of the term neutral in carrier neutral. And you know, we always talk about a carrier neutral facility. And the term neutral obviously plays a large part in the success of the operation. What are your feelings on that portion? Because there's a lot of data centers in Africa, but the fact that they're neutral or not neutral, how does that help your business either fail or succeed?
Yeah, look, you know, everybody's got their own definition of what neutral is. We have seen on the continent a lot of data centers calling themselves neutral, but then offering services that we personally feel wouldn't fit into that definition. You know, at Terraco, we always tried to say that we're not just carrier neutral, but we're neutral in all of the aspects of our business. You know, and it's difficult. You know, we slip up sometimes, but we are meant to be neutral in every single aspect of the business. So again, yeah, I don't know if this is something that is globally accepted. You know, I've had conversations.
Let me say this: do customers really care? And if so, which ones?
Certain,
if not,
certain
which
customers
ones?
do. Yeah, certain customers do care. You know, it's in some places, as long as you can run a cross connect between two third parties in a data center, some people might consider that as neutral enough. But there are a few networks that will take it very seriously. You know, you get RFPs where the first question is this a new facility? If you say no, then you're done. And, you know, there's obviously a lot of reasons for that. A lot of them are political. A lot of networks have been burned before by facilities that are not, you know, truly neutral to their standards. So it does make a difference, and it gives people feel comfortable and safe with knowing that something is neutral.
To add to that, yes, customers do care. We are signing contracts which are forcing and ensuring that our customer has open access to any other customer of mine in the facility and to any other network which is coming into and going out of the facility. That is baked into the contract, as Andrew says, on day one when you meet the client. A number of parts of neutrality, and some folks have come to me and said, well, they want to offer storage services or value-added services or network things, and can they have exclusivity in our buildings? And people, although we meet them the first time and explain neutrality, still ask that question of us, which obviously our answer is always no, we can't go there. On the vendor side, some people have said to me, because I use a lot of Schneider gear, I quite like it, but it's not exclusive to that. So although some people look at it and say, well, it looks like we're an exclusive Schneider shop on the electrical equipment particularly, that does not necessarily mean that we are bound to that supplier. It's a choice we've made in that facility. Next facility might be slightly different based on the technical parameters and the design at that time. So neutrality is both in terms of us being open to for our customers and to the markets to do what they want, but it's also to be neutral about the types of technologies and products and brands and suppliers that we use internally, and to make sure that there are no funny hidden agendas between us and our suppliers or us and our customers.
So before I move on to the next question, perhaps I'll open up the floor so we can make this interactive as well. If there's anyone who wants to ask a question at this time. Ben is going for what doesn't appear to be a mic.
Well, I think.
Yeah, so interesting comment from Alex. I fully agree with you around working with local construction methods. One of the bigger users of data centers as we go forward are going to be, coming from North America and very large companies, large global companies, and the customers that we are seeing are very, very focused on health and safety, and some of the construction methods that we know about in Kenya would not meet those standards, and even in South Africa, health and safety is probably more mature, but challenges around the expectations of the customer with regards to health and safety. So both in construction and in operations. So you want to have any thoughts around how you keep a safe working environment and how you keep to European, North American standards as demanded by the customers in a world where that may be completely different to your construction workers?
Just to clarify, you're talking about during construction or during operation? Both. As I said, work with the standards. You need to know the standards. You have to also decide. If we talk about fire safety, for example, you got IPCB sort of following the European methods, the ULFM in the US, and the NFPA, which is the fire protection authorities in the US, is by far and away the most hardcore, strict, detailed method on fire safety. So you can take a decision if you feel that your markets are very much coming from the US to follow and to install ULFM. Comes with a price tag, and you can go with that. By and large, though, I do find many local, foreign customers are saying that provided the buildings comply with local standards, good to go. As long as you comply with them, it works. But of course, very often our local standards aren't up to snuff. So you have to put the effort and demonstrate to them that you are installing equipment that meets them and decide on that price. But the guidelines are there. Use architects that are familiar with them. If it's 30 meters to your nearest, to your nearest emergency exit point, well, you can design your building accordingly. Data centers are not necessarily as high from some of the fire standards as residential buildings are, which would have a 2-hour fire rating. 60-minute fire rating in data center is enough. So it's doable. Apply the standards, read them, get consultants and architects and designers who know technical buildings and how to put them together. On the other hand, your 2-hour fire rating is achieved by your typical building methods here, the stone blocks that people often use. The other big one that causes a lot of trouble is earthing systems. In East Africa, we find a lot of weakness in electrical consultants' knowledge on earthing systems and how to deploy them properly and safely, both from protecting your customers' equipment on the one hand, as well as protecting human life. Other health and safety stuff, again, is, I think, relatively straightforward to read up. Ramps here, emergency exits, and perhaps the other one that is often overlooked in parts is fresh air handling systems for human-occupied spaces as well as machinery-occupied spaces. So I think it's doable, but it will cost some money to meet the standards that everybody's looking for.
Yeah, look, I'll add to that, and I think South Africa is slightly different, but I mean, the build is an ongoing process. I mean, people look at it and see just construction, but where we have had clients that are particularly concerned about it, it is an ongoing process where we have people on site, checking up on things all of the time, interacting with our health and safety officers and the project. So, it's an ongoing thing, and for a reason, obviously. These are data centers, and they are going to be, well, they are critical infrastructure. So yeah, it is a big part of building. This is not just throwing bricks on the ground.
Right. And this brings me to my next question, which you also can't see. Djibouti. Djibouti has a unique opportunity to be what I think could be an East African hub. Lots of cables going into it, et cetera, et cetera. However, they seem to be, shooting themselves in the foot, not exploiting that opportunity. There's a data center there. Not exactly sure how active it is. There is an exchange point in that data center. I'm not getting rave reviews about it either. As a data center operator in Djibouti, what are they doing wrong?
But I think this goes back to my first point, is that I don't necessarily think it is just the data center. The entire market needs to be involved in the entire concept, and specifically, you need regulatory environment that makes it simple to operate. From a data center point of view, in a place like that, obviously you need to make sure that you're in the right location, but also you need to make sure that people within your facility can interconnect openly and at a price that is reasonable. So I don't think that the entire market is ready for that or hungry for that in that region. And it's not just there. I mean, there are a couple of examples where there is potential, but it's just not all of the pieces of the puzzle are.
So are you saying that a data center operator cannot influence the other areas of the economy to support that infrastructure?
No, of course you can. And that's why I said after the first question is that you're not just building a data center, you're going to get yourself involved in a whole lot of conversations that you didn't think you would have to get involved in the first place. So you absolutely, as a facility, be prepared to do as much as possible to influence the rest of the market.
Alex?
I'll be perhaps less politically correct and just say they need to charge $100 for a cross connect. Other than that, yeah, it's a community. You need to engage all the people that want to be there and help them to be there. And different markets and different people have different budgets and have to afford things, but still have to get a foot in. And until you can make that community and get folks in and start interacting and cross-connecting and peering and bringing equipment, it's difficult to move forward, I think.
I think, Alex, I'll ask you as much as also ask the audience the next question. So you must have some thoughts on this one. South Africa, being on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, appears to be growing as a hub for that region, and even for some regions from East Africa. Doesn't make any sense at all because it's just too far down the map. But how come that is working? From a data center perspective, attracting not only global but also African enterprises, and as ICOLO, how do you see that, for example? I know I'm asking the wrong question to the right country, but it would be interesting to get your perspective on why you think that is. Why you think South Africa is sort of becoming the first point people would want to go to, despite the fact that it's so far away, latency-wise. I mean, we've seen the beautiful pictures from Ben about, Cape to Cairo. What are your thoughts on that? And then we'll see what Andrew has to say, and obviously anyone from the audience that might have a viewpoint.
I think, speaking in the Kenyan market, on the enterprise side of things, people, despite, as Ben says, things being cloud ready since 2015, and even a bit before that, the WAN links and networks really improving in Kenya, which is what I'm familiar with. At least on the enterprise side, there's still a big lack of comfort and unfamiliarity with the place where my data should live. And for those businesses that still have an account server or an email server or something of their own, there's a feeling to want to keep that in-house in their office and have some control. Yes, there are some bandwidth costs concerns that those guys will have. I don't know why it's been more important for South Africa to come up first for some of the bigger and some of the other cloud points, because as you say, it is far away. But the fiber networks are present along the eastern seaboard now. I'm not the right guy to ask.
Well, Andrew, as you answer that question, I will say, with iColor coming up in East Africa right now, do you reckon they will start to take more of that business or become more of an attractive point, just from a distance point of view, now that there's an option?
Look, I mean, this goes back to your previous question. Why doesn't it work in and it is a difficult thing. It's something that we don't always like to talk about. Why is South Africa? We're so far away from Europe. With a lot of your content being sourced out of Europe, it never really made any sense if you look at it on a map. And again, with Ben's pictures, it's a tough sell. But it works in South Africa because, and I think one of the primary reasons, as we know, and I think you would remember as well, Seacom was started around the same time. The environment made it easy for us to exist. If we didn't have those regulatory changes, we would be in the same boat as everybody else. That said, I don't think that I keep saying to everybody, there are hubs that have been identified at the moment. We all know what they are, but those are certainly not. I mean, it's not the end or be all and end all of what's going to happen on the continent. This is something that is spread, and with iColor coming up and driving the neutral message into that region, I think that's great. It's great for the region. I don't particularly see that as an issue, regardless of whether it takes business away from South Africa. We shouldn't expect that there should be one centralized hub. That can't happen. It's good for the region, and you will see over time. It's happened in South Africa where the South African neutral market has become successful, and you've seen the positive effect that it has had on neighboring countries. To the extent that it's now we see the same thing happening on the east. So yes, absolutely, that is going to be a new hub, and you're going to see that spread out from there. And hopefully the same thing is going to happen on the west, or at least we anticipate it will, because this model has played out in South Africa, and I expect it to do the same elsewhere. So yes, you will have hubs, similarly to the way that you have hubs in Europe. But there will be more of them, and the coverage that each of those hubs has will have a positive effect on all of those regions. But yeah, again, I just think that South Africa got in at the right time. We took the opportunity that was there, and yeah, there are a number of countries on the continent that do have the opportunity, and you kind of wish that you could make a difference there, but there are so many moving parts. Everything needs to be, the market just needs to be hungry and ready for it.
Anyone from the floor have some thoughts on this one? And while they're coming up, Alex, are you going to overtake Djibouti as a hub? Alex, are you gonna, as Ben gets ready, do you see Mombasa becoming
Yeah,
Djibouti?
yes, I think so. I mean, quite like Mombasa. It's 9 milliseconds Mombasa to Dar. It's 9 milliseconds Mombasa Nairobi. A little bit more up into Kampala, Rwanda, and so on. It's quite convenient to the Mogadishu side, and there's some other Indian Ocean portions too. So the growth plans are such for that. Yeah, I think so, and I think some of the content that is coming into our facility and some of the customers we're talking to that could have gone to Djibouti beforehand, but haven't is kind of a highlight.
Yes.
Yeah, like, so two things. I mean, first of all, South Africa, by having a large population, but a very mature ICT market and a very big spend on ICT, that then becomes a place for data centers, and why Terraco have done so well. But the draw for data centers is actually population and population doing business and economic activity. So the data centers in Europe, the initial ones were in London. They were not in Marseille. Marseille has come up as a coastal interconnection town, but London was the starting place. They were not in Cornwall, where their landing stations are. They were in London. So the evolution starts with data centers and connectivity coming to the major commercial hubs. So that is why Johannesburg is there, Nairobi is there. Or Djibouti is very marginal in terms, it has economic activity. It's at a port, but not much else going on. And that's why I'm saying Lagos. Lagos has got this potential because it's got 30 million people in Lagos, or 40 million people, plus the population of Nigeria as being so large. But logically, that's what actually happens. It follows economic trends. If we were in charge, and the network people, and we were saying where the traffic would go, it would make more sense to put the data inland, right? So we've done some things with gaming, and we've put them in Uganda, Mark. So because you don't use very much bandwidth, coming all the way in to feed your caches and your cloud data centers, use it from the coastal landing station to the central places, and then all the empty bandwidth, because those cables are symmetric, but there's a lot of empty bandwidth going out of Africa to the coast. So you'd use then the reverse network and fill the network in both directions. So that's the logical network approach. It doesn't follow that approach because we're not actually determining its economic forces.
Nishal, you look like you wanted to say something.
Hi, Nishal Govardhan, Packet Clearinghouse. So I wanted to comment on a few of the things that you've been asking about. The first was to answer the question where data centers grow, and I've got to agree with Ben. It sounds like I'm going to be saying a lot of me too's, but Ben nailed it. It's population growth. When we advise folks on where to build internet exchange points, one of the things is always, do you have people and are they transacting? If you don't have people and if they're not transacting, an exchange is not going to survive, and it's the same for a data center. You probed a lot about South Africa, and Andrew nailed it. What is not coming out is South Africa's bad past. Data centers didn't happen by accident. It's the right regulatory environment that has to be there. I mean, we've been online for a long time. CDNs have been in South Africa since the last century, by the way. But the growth and the opportunities have not started to occur the way that people talk about them now, but up until the regulatory environment has gotten in there. And on the flip side of that, the Djiboutian or even the Egyptian market, because you're casually not mentioning Egypt, haven't grown because when you have an environment where the telco has more employees than a government, you're not going to get policy change happening anytime soon. When you have an environment where it's $10,000 to run a cross connect from the cable landing station to the data center, which is about 1 kilometer, I think, because I walked that distance, it's not going to grow. So you have to bring down costs. You have to bring down the cost to cross connect from the data center back into the cable landing station. There's no point having people there if they can't get out and get access, right? So I don't necessarily feel that it's the data center folk that are necessarily doing things wrong, but I'm a realist. I live in the real world. I don't think that a data center operator is going to change policy in a country where the telco really rules the country. I mean, it's easy to consider where the sources of revenue come from. They get most of their money coming out of telecoms and port usage. Okay, and the military base rent, the military base renting that they do to NATO. To answer something else that you'd asked, or rather something I thought was not mentioned, but ties into the aspect of regulatory, was an interesting law that one of my friends told me about in the Netherlands, that it's actually illegal for you to refuse the right of way to lay fiber. So if you own a building or premises rather, and somebody wants to lay fiber and you're in the way, you can't refuse them the right to do that, provided they don't damage any facilities that are there and they leave everything in the state that they find it. And I think we don't have those laws here yet. We're still at the point where we're saying, no, we're going to make it difficult, or we're going to find somebody to move the fiber across. And we haven't gotten to the point where fiber's everywhere. Not that we can't get there, we haven't got there yet, because we create artificial costs. We extract rents in places we shouldn't from putting fiber in. And until we do that, we don't have the richness of fiber density that a place like Amsterdam has. Until you do that, you're not going to get people using the population but that we were talking about. You're not going to get people using services that require the installation of high density data centers that are going to drive your population forward, that are going to drive the demand for CDNs to want to come down to your environment. Sorry, lots of mishmash answers, but I think I covered all the things I wanted.
Thank you, Nishal. And
So
I think
if I can just add, Michelle, on the regulatory question and how it affects other countries, you will remember that the regulatory change was not a government decision. It was not something that was done for the benefit of anybody. It was a forced decision. And I guess that that's one of the conversations that you're going to have. And goes back to Mark's question as well, is whose responsibility is it to ensure that that change happens? And in South Africa, there was one particular...
Was that the Altec moment?
Yeah.
Or the one they called it?
That's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
But, how do you achieve the same thing in a different country? And again, whose responsibility is it? If you're looking to build a neutral data center in a market that doesn't have that open regulatory field already, it's a different, that's kind of chicken and egg, right? Why were you looking to do it in the first place? Because you're not going to be able to build a neutral facility unless those bits are in place. So is it your responsibility as the facility to go and try and enforce that change? And that's why I said, again, if you're looking to do this, you're going to have a lot of conversations with a lot of people. You're going to have to do a lot of lobbying as well to make sure that, you get somebody to start making that change.
I don't doubt it. I also think that it's disingenuous to think, however, that every place where cables land are going to be a natural location for a data center. Because if it were, we would have had data centers in Sisimbra a long time ago, right? So there's and as the discussion has proved, there are elements that are coming out that drive the build of these things. It's the staff that you need to man this. It's the access to services. Aside from electricity, let's just take electricity off the table. We all understand that. But it's laws around importation of goods, right? We were having this discussion last night at Drinks about moving stuff into South Africa. It's laws about who can come and how you visit. Does somebody need a visa to do work at your data center? There's a long list that we worked with the AOC. Andrew was part of that team as well to produce, to say these are the elements that you need to have if you really want to drive the build of technology services in your.
So on that theme, let's have one that's upside down. Nigeria, almost 200 million people. Seems like an obvious choice for a data center. What's the struggle?
Yeah, again, it has been identified as a hub. I think everybody kind of understands that. But again, a lot of that is to do with the regulatory environment. Interconnection is not particularly great there. I just don't think that the market is ready.
The top three locations, every time you speak to an OTT, a CDN, a service provider, whatever, it's Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria. It's always top of list.
Yes. Well, back to the previous point that was made was, Nigeria is one of the largest economies on so yes, it makes sense. There are a lot of eyeballs there, so it makes it a bit easier to make a business case, especially from a content point of view, and because it is close enough to Europe to make it easy to get there. And it's also, you would think that it is a perfect landing point for interconnection to the US. I'll go back to it and say I just don't think that the market is you know, because there are things that could change, but whose responsibility is it to go and do that? And certainly from a neutral facilities point of view, we are seeing neutral facilities going up in Nigeria, not at enough scale and potentially not fast enough, but it is happening. It is changing. I guess it just goes back to that whole question: whose responsibility is it to change the market, to make to make the market open for that sort of business? I don't think it is necessarily just one person, but I think there needs to be a driver to get everybody together to make that difference.
I mean, Alex, you see the potential for Nigeria. Would you risk it and build a data center in Lagos? And as you think about answering that, I'll ask the audience. Apart from Ben and Nishal, why you think it might not be the right time to build a data center there right now? What's the actual blocker?
I think, again, sort of trying to drive and I keep saying this, a sort of set of standards and quality really has to help. Just as a side note, my business model power budget in Mombasa is for 20% on generator and the balance on grid. In Lagos, it's exactly the other way around. You run 20% on grid and the rest on generator, and that is just insane. Electric grid there was privatized quite some time ago, and still you see power transformers sitting on the ground on pavements with the doors hanging open and the bus bars hanging out, and children playing football right next to that. Doing handoffs in street manholes as well, in order to get into a sort of point where you can then cross-connect with other parties as well, is just troublesome. I think that just brings headache and heartache for folks. So I'm a more technical guy, so I just want to clean up and tidy up and get things built to some kind of scale and quality that then the markets can then trust, that they can see that can be delivered at the right price point and will work and be reliable. So I think that there's plenty of homework they have to do in Lagos on that front.
So I just want to add, and perhaps ask the audience why, since there are all of these challenges, we're hearing people talking about neighboring countries to Nigeria, but perhaps being a better interconnection point. And this conversation has been sort of floated on and off over the years, but it hasn't actually changed anything. People are still seeing Nigeria as that hub. And why is that? Given that, there are potentials around, what is the difference? Why are these other places coming? Is it just because people are struggling in Nigeria? Or is it because there are actual real contenders out there?
Ben, you look like you have a theory. Say it. It's fine. You're among friends. You might need a mic.
Thanks. It's Andrew touched on it and he almost said it. It boils down to everybody doing their job. So you work for Seacom, Mark. What made us build fiber inland was Seacom were building a cable in the sea, and we built inland.
But there's a cable system in Nigeria.
Yeah, but let me finish. So we were doing our job. Terraco see the data center, they're doing their job. We're all doing our job. And we're all doing our job, but we're all cooperating with each other. So from the outset, it wasn't like you built a cable and we tried to build another one and never talked to you. We built a cable, we bought capacity on that, and then we did our thing and he did it. And we all did our job and we all understood what we're trying to do. In Nigeria, I just don't see that happening. I see Orange focused on we're doing mobile communications. I see Main One focused on we're doing a cable. Main One, not even interconnecting or peering into South Africa? How can you become another hub if you're not connecting to the other hubs? You know, you've got a whole bunch of companies not getting together and doing what they should do. And I think that's what's happened differently in those places, that the companies that they've done their job, and we found our niche, you found your niche, you found your niche, blah, 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 we've all done our thing. We all work together to use it. And that's not happening in Nigeria, in West Africa at all. You've got governments in Cameroon building cables, but they're not working with what it is. You know, they're not deregulating. They're not having an Altec moment. You know, they're keeping things tightly regulated. It's not all happening at the same time. Not with governments, policy and governments, operators, cable operators, all working together in the same pace.
So do you think that if there was a sudden drastic drop in cross-connect pricing at the landing station to get into Lagos, those things would automatically happen?
Some things. One thing I see happening in Lagos is a good thing, and they've told me that they are bringing in a new license for international operators, which is a cut down license, not requiring you to have an international company. So that potentially being an Altec moment. So if you're an international company and you want to put data into South Africa, you can buy one of the many CNS licenses for 50 bob and you're in. It's a bit more complicated into Kenya because you have to open some kind of local company with a local shareholder and other things like this. Whereas if Nigeria are going to open up a license for international operators where they can come bring your things without having to have a local office, an entity, a representative, all those other complicated things that they don't want, that's a potential changer. And if you know that can influence. It's a whole bunch of things, but you know they all happen at the same time. And it can make a difference. And also the extension now Main One extending into some of the orange destinations could change. It could be about to happen.
I'll just add, your question was, would that automatically make other things better? Nothing happens automatically. But it is, if that were to happen, it would be one of the many changes that would make a difference. You know, and back to the licensing, putting something down in Nigeria means, as an international company, you actually still do need feet on the ground. It is incredibly difficult to operate remotely in a place like that. You need somebody local, somebody who understands the methods of doing business, and you know that also is a cost.
My final question, which we're right in the nose. I'll ask Alex to address this first, and it will be a combination question. It will be about exchange points. Obviously, we know that exchange points are critical to the success of the data center. And I think iColo obviously are talking to Asteroids, talking to KXP and so forth. Especially with new data centers in Africa. You know, should there be as much attention paid into hosting exchange points as much as customers, enterprise customers, service providers? But then also, is it appropriate for a data center to own and operate an exchange point as well?
Yeah, good question. I mean, for new data center builds, make sure that you have buy-in from the existing, if there is an existing exchange point. Make sure that you have buy-in from that exchange point, and keep them involved in that conversation. And again, it's like I said, building a data center is not just about building a physical structure. This is one of those conversations you're going to have. You're going to have to get that buy-in. If there is an existing exchange point, get that buy-in. Because if you're looking at a neutral facility, it goes hand in hand. You know, we've seen a lot of success on the facility side because of the exchange point. You know, there's no denying it. We have it's like a different model, obviously. I mean, our exchange point is a separate entity, but we do own and operate it, as you said. We don't charge for it, but you know, we all understand, and when we were quite neutral, well, transparent about the fact that Teraco funds this, and it is a way of making the facilities more attractive. It has worked. it's been one of our best sales tools ever. And I guess it is a a slightly different situation in South Africa because we did have an existing and it was a very difficult decision that we had to make at that stage. There were a number of reasons that we had to do that, but it's the way that it happened. I think the market is mature enough to be able to support two IXL. So yeah, again, we can't look at 54 countries and say that this is the right way or that is the right way or this is the wrong way. What works in South Africa might not necessarily work in a different country. But I think the important thing is that you need that buy-in, and you need to, at least to have those conversations, because if you've got a very strong internet exchange or you've got a market which is potentially smaller, your neutral facility is not going to work if you don't have buy-in from the internet. Remember, an internet exchange is not just a bunch of technical guys. An internet exchange is a hub for human networking, right? And these are the people that are peering at an internet exchange. Those are the same people that make that market work. Those are the people that drive the internet in that region. Doesn't matter, it doesn't matter the kind of people that are there. These are the people that are making the internet work, and you need to be in that community. You need to have good standing in that community. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
I think from iCall, I've taken a different approach, unless you plan to run data an exchange point. You've otherwise worked with KXP as well as Asteroid. How much of that do you see being a major part of your business?
KXP is up and running. They're active IX in our data center. Asteroid is on its way within weeks, I think, delivery-wise for that. Look, there's a theme I think that's actually come out of this session that we've done up here today, and Nishal, Ben, and us, I think, have all come to this. Everybody has to do its part, and you have to create a community. And so data centers are very much about the community of folks, of people, the human conversations that you have around it, and each little portion has to be there. We've opted to support and to keep the existing internet exchange points in place, as well as to welcome another internet exchange point company, and I think that's reflective in our case of our openness, our neutrality, to let anybody do what has to be done. That said, internet exchange points are important, and it's, as Andrew says, it's an important place. You've got to bring people together to communicate and to share and to connect with each other. We could well step into that breach if it's not something that will work with the existing partners that are happening. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Asteroid and KXP will pick up the slack and do what needs to be done in Mombasa and Nairobi for us. And for us, that's the best way, because that's a group of people with their niche, as Ben says, doing what they do and doing it well, and bringing everybody together.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes.
It's a comment, maybe. I think I'm of a different opinion. I think a data center operating an exchange point is a plus, because most of the people want to come on board and see if it's of value, the way NAP Africa does. And it's more of a driver, because you're starting it as an initiative. It's more like a value add, because, or I don't know if, Andrew, you're starting to charge very soon for maybe people are celebrating, and then we don't know, maybe next year you have a plan to start charging port fee and membership. Not sure.
Well, no, absolutely not. And when I was talking about that, I remember that there are other facilities operators that run exchange points, but people tend not to like them because it gets sucked into the product management portfolio, and people then start looking at at it as a money driver, as something that we can. And we've had this conversation with a lot of people around the world, where they say, we've got, 350, almost 360 autonomous systems connected to exchanges. The cross connect numbers are massive. We're talking about probably about 750, 770 physical cross connects going into the internet exchange. And people come to us and say, well, geez, you guys have got you've got so much capacity now, you've got so much momentum. Why don't you start charging? You can make a lot of money off of this. And I just don't buy that. I don't agree with that. And, I just always felt that it wouldn't have been appropriate. And back to your question, is it appropriate for a data center to have an internet exchange in the first place? I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to charge a port fee or a cable fee or whatever for that. And the reason why is because we never started it to try and make money off of peering. It was just because what we had seen across the globe was that a successful exchange point meant that the market was mature. Not mature, but it was a healthy environment. And we've seen this. You can track the growth and the health of Terraco as a facility to the growth and to the interconnectedness within the facility, but also to the exchange point. So it is, in its current form, it is a great product, but it's not something that we're ever going to charge for.
Yeah, because one thing I was thinking is, I think it's a good job that you guys have been offering the service, no port fee. I have no budget for next year to pay you. But since there's another player who's charging people, who is now in all your data centers, is also in the same building, will I not think next year when maybe the service is not working very well, then I say maybe there's a better response from the other side, and I say it's because I'm not paying you anything. So
you're suggesting that you wouldn't have any recourse because you're not paying for it.
Maybe somebody may choose like that. Yeah.
Have you met Michelle? No, look, I totally understand that, and but you must remember that we, within the business, we link the performance of NAP Africa to Terraco. It is one of our biggest touch points with our clients. So it is a Terraco product, effectively, right? Because if anything breaks, you're going to phone me. I'm employed by Terraco. I'm paid by Terraco. NAP Africa is a separate organization, but we spend as much time and effort as what we have. And we've been growing the team, over the years because it has just gotten to a point where we've needed to have an entire team to look after that exchange point. I hear what you're saying about people not necessarily feeling comfortable with not paying for something. I don't think that it is the case in here. There is too much attached to NAP Africa to not care about stability and the performance.
Maybe one more.
We're really eating into Arnold's time, but okay.
Yeah, based on the question that you're asking about expansion of iColo in East Africa, don't you think the unpredictable government policies and rules coming from every corner being a threat maybe for players from coming into different countries? Somebody was giving a presentation of UXP being threatened by governments, all that struggles. I think TIX is almost being picked up by the government and all that. In Kenya, a film body wakes up today, says Netflix will not do this or that. Don't you think it will make these players not to think of even coming to those countries, leave alone joining iColo? Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a good discussion to have. I think one over lunch. I think that the question whose answer I never got, so we can kick off and get Arnold up here, was Alex, yes or no? Do you think running your own exchange fund will be appropriate for your neutrality? Yes or no? Not going to say yes or no, is he?
No.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Please, a warm hand to the panel.